All lured by the easy button. You go to that one, Joe? There it is. We've got a lot of white in the screen today for some reason, so I apologize for washing things out. It's the Staple advertising campaign for Staples, the office supply store. We are lured by the easy way, aren't we? If you're asked the question, well, we can do this the hard way, or we can do this the easy way, what's the implied answer? The implied answer is, take the easy way. Take the easy way. Sometimes, though, there's just no easy way to achieve our goals. In fact, if they're worthy goals, they'll take considerable work. I was rereading a portion of Rudy Giuliani's book on leadership that I read the first time a few years ago, in which he describes what he was doing prior to 9/11 in the year 2001, back before the attacks on the World Trade Center and other sites in the United States. He'd been a trial lawyer, and as you know, he was then the mayor of New York City. After 2001, he would rise to national fame because of his leadership under such a time of pressure and crisis. But before September 11th of that year, what was he doing? Well, apparently he was writing a book, preparing to write a book on leadership. He said that by September 10th of that year, he had been working for months, putting together the structure of this book and understanding how he was going to write it. He sat down for many, many hours with Ken Kurson, who was paid to help him write the book. Rudy said this of the moment prior to 9/11. It had become almost a seminar for me, a self-imposed program on how to run an organization. It was as if God had provided an opportunity to design a course in leadership just when I needed it most. By September 11th, this hard journey and all of this work that had become so much a part of who he was had uniquely poised him to lead in the crisis that occurred on 9/11 and thereafter. Instead of taking a path of easy profits in writing a book, he was introduced to the hard way of real leadership and real impact, real influence, and real good. Now, what if he had decided, oh, it's enough to be the mayor of New York City. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, New York City being one of the biggest cities in the world. Maybe it's enough. What if he had felt the impulse not to do all that preparation, that, well, it was a lot of work. Maybe I'll get to that after I retire. Why would I push myself so hard? Why would I make my life so difficult when I've got a big job and a long day already? Why would I put on top of it the writing of a book? Why shouldn't I wait for kind of a memoir part of that part of my life? What if he had done that? What would have been the outcome? We have no way of knowing, of course, what would have happened if he would have followed the lure of the easy way. Now, in our gospel reading today, Jesus and his disciples are in Caesarea Philippi, and up until this point, the journey has been, well, remarkably successful the way in which people would see success today. There have been healings and big crowds, always bigger crowds, miracles, lots of expectation about who Jesus was and what he was going to become. And so Jesus asked his disciples privately, who do people say that I am? And they shoot out a few answers, and then he wants to know who they think he is, his closest friends. And Peter answers enthusiastically, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Peter gets the right answer, but doesn't know exactly what the answer means. It was one of the highest points, one of the most dramatic points in the Gospel of Matthew, sort of a pinnacle moment when the disciples all got A+ on the exam, because we know that usually they don't get that highest scores. It was a high point in their journey with Jesus. Everyone expected that the Messiah that was coming would serve like King David did, would be a messianic kind of king, would bring a political and military solution to the problems in their life, overhanded approach to life. They expected the king with this political and military victory to provide God's people with a time of plenty and a time of comfort, something that they hadn't had for a long time. Who doesn't want plenty? Who doesn't want comfort. In fact, if we're really honest with yourself, and I sort of assessed my own prayers over the last week, I typically was praying for myself or for someone else, plenty or comfort. It was almost exclusively my intercession. Now, I had thanksgivings, of course, but the majority of what I was asking for was plenty or comfort for someone else or for myself. We too want God to make our way easy, assure us success, and clear up ambiguity. It's upsetting. It's really upsetting when the way gets complicated. The path becomes less clear and the road becomes steep and difficult and unpaved. It was ironic to me this morning that I had, a million computer problems trying to get access from my computer on my desk to the laptop. So you only have 4 of the 10 slides and the colors washed out. It was a perfect example of, this isn't going to be easy this morning, is it? You're just going to make me live into the tension of this moment and the frustration. Why, God? Bring me comfort and ease and plenty. Let my slides appear. It was a perfect example of the frustration that we feel when things don't go our way and the way becomes unpaved and we're uncertain. After Jesus clarifies what it means to be this Davidic Messiah, one who serves, one who suffers, one who dies and rises, it's Peter, the ringleader of the disciples, who takes Jesus aside and says, "Oh, God forbid it, Lord, not you. This could never happen to you. Absolutely not. You've got the way paved to the palace. You've got the way paved to the easy way, and we're going to be your ministers of economics and defense and education and the interior, and it's going to be great. And the nation will be great, and God's name will be praised because of the greatness that you've brought to us. Oh, forbid it, Lord, that you would suffer and die." And what does Jesus say to Peter? In some of the least flattering terms that are included for us in the Gospels, and every Gospel that tells this story includes this same moniker, Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, for you're standing in the way of God's plan. You're a stumbling block. You've got your head set on what you want, not on what God needs to happen." The only other time that Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew references the presence of Satan, now he does other 2 references to Satan in general, but into the presence of Satan is in the temptation story of the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness in Matthew 4. If you recall that story, what is Satan tempting Jesus to do? It's to take the easy way, to turn the rock into bread, to get easy believers, to use overhanded power to accomplish the goal of making people believe, but by force, not by love. He was being tempted by the lure of the easy way. If there's any doubt that Jesus was resisting the lure of the easy way, listen to his words that follow. "If any would become my disciples, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." Where's the easy button for that? Many of us today, most of us today, because of the nature of the culture in which we live and the way in which human nature is, make the mistake of wanting to follow the easy way in everything. Many of us are devotees to the easy way, even though we know that it's self-denial that more often than not leads to success. It's hard work that brings gain. It's selfless service that is actually the way to personal and corporate fulfillment. That it's sacrifice that marks the way of a life that is shaped by love. We know that looking out for number 1 might get us some success in the short run, but it comes at such a colossal cost to satisfaction and communal contentment, to family life, to personal care. We know these things. I think we know these things. They seem self-evident. And yet there's always a long line at the lottery booth. Always. There's always a long line under the door marked the easy way, while there is absolutely no line under the door that says self-denial and sacrifice. At best, it's a short one. This is all the while that we utter that famous line of poetry, "Two paths diverged in the woods, and I chose the easy way, and it made my life comfortable." Is that how that poem goes? What? Am I not seeing this right? What? A blank stare. Come on, back to literature class here. No, two paths diverged in the wood, and he took the one that was less traveled, and that made what? It harder? No, it made all the difference. He skipped the fact that it was hard because he already got into fulfillment. It made the difference because it was an adventure. It made a difference not because it was easy and comfortable, but because something important was achieved, because meaning was put into it. He saw something that others could not see. He chose a different way. Zig Ziglar, I've told this story before, was with a group visiting the Washington Monument, and he and his party, as they approached the monument, heard a guide announcing loudly that there would be a 2-hour wait for the elevator to the top of the monument for a wonderful view of the plaza in Washington, D.C. However, with a smile, the guide said, "There is no waiting to the top for those who want to take the stairs." Of course there's no waiting to the top for those who want to take the stairs. Of course. Because we succumb to the lure of the easy way. It is our culture and the nature of the sinful self. The salvation of the whole world, the salvation of your souls, and of billions of human beings over the eons, the life of the created universe is reconciled, being dependent upon Jesus taking the counterintuitive way, the difficult way, the way of the cross. It all hangs on it, and we build a whole theology based on that. And yet we succumb to the lure of the easy way time and time again. I'd postulate that in this era of the death of the church in the West, the challenge of secularism, the rise of imperialistic Islam, that we ought to again regain our hold on that which makes Christianity both paradoxical and great. If any want to be my disciples, let them deny themselves, take up the cross, and follow me. For those who want to lose their lives, or those who want to save their lives will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the gospel, they'll find it. For what does it profit a person if they gain the whole world and forfeit life? It's a good question. And yet, how many do you know who forfeited their life by wasting it, chasing some version of success in their mind? We like to treat faith like a hobby. We like to treat church like a pastime, a choice among many choices in the consumer marketplace. As long as we do this, we demonstrate that the Lord of our lives is something else and not God. We demonstrate that we're not fully committed to the cause of Christ, but to our own causes, which is, of course, at the heart of the sinful self. We show that we are filled with as much self-interest as the most worldly person that's out there. For what or to whom have you laid your life down? Think about it. I know that you have competing commitments. Family, work, home, obligations, pensions, retirement, plans, hopes, dreams, pleasures, difficulties. All these things compete for us. But what are you willing to commit to? What are you putting your life in the direction of? Jesus seeks to give us an abundant life. But in order for us to receive it, he needs for us to leave go of the death grip of the things that we have in this life, things that are less than eternal. In his book, Die Young, catchy title, isn't it, by Michael DeMarco, he writes, it's an interesting book, it's for teens, so therefore the kind of interesting title. The majority of my life, Michael says, has been me living for me. Even when I identified myself as a Christian, it was about the social aspects of my life, or the fire insurance that was involved. My faith was all about keeping me alive and keeping Christ buried. It was like Freddy Krueger or some other horror movie villain. Every time you think I'm dead, my hand comes out of the ground and I dig my way out of the grave, looking to resume living my life on my own terms and usually to a grisly end. That feels a little bit familiar to me. Maybe not quite so graphic, but it feels kind of familiar to me. How about you? To die to self is to live to Christ and nothing else, and to be set free from the bondage into sin and to self, and to live a new kind of life. When our lives are hidden in God, think about this image. When your lives are tucked away, encrypted into the life of God, the ego, the self, is founded in a very different place, isn't it? No longer swayed in the same ways by opinions of others or by success or failure models of the world, our lives have found a new strength, for they've died to everything in them that another person could damage or another person could break. We've got story after story of these. In the 1800s, missionary James Calvert left for the Fiji Islands to share Jesus with what then was cannibals living on the island. It was a notorious place, and the captain of the ship that brought him was trying to dissuade him and his entourage from leaving the ship, saying, "You will lose your lives, and the lives of those who are with you if you go among the savages." To which Calvert replied, "We died before we came here." We died before we came here. Today, Fiji is a strongly Christian island. Now, you've been seeing on screen 4 of the 10 that I intended to talk about the paradox of losing one's life and gaining it, and the great strength that comes by being of good service while offering to the world ourselves in Christ's name. All 10 of them were quite bold statements. You'll have to see them later. I'll put them in a bulletin or something. Bold statements made by some of the great leaders of the church throughout history, especially that one. We know that success comes by hard work, sacrifice, and selfless commitment. Your salvation was won in a similar way by self-sacrificing service of Christ, and it was given to you as a gift. So let's get it straight that our turning to Christ is only in response to all that he's already done for us. So let's not think about this as earning Christ somehow or being good enough for him, because that's not what it's about. Our salvation was given to us by the unmerited favor and grace of God, by the work of Christ, who went to the cross for us and was risen from the dead, simply because it was God's will for you and the billions of other souls and the whole created universe. That is God's will for us, that we would become his children, and that we would come to a certain way of life and would see our lives answering his call to abundance. The invitation that he offers us today, the invitation that was taken up by the disciples, is how Christ has reached the ends of the earth and has reached us and our ancestors in Africa and in Europe and in North America, and pretty much to the ends of the earth. It was because someone was willing to say no to the easy way and yes to the way of Christ. Now, over the next few weeks, New Hope is going to be taking a look at the 5 practices of fruitful congregations, and we're going to be having a sermon series on those practices and Bible studies on those practices and a devotional book that focuses on those things, and we really need your commitment to that process. I know. It may disturb bridge. It may disrupt maybe a coffee appointment that you have with someone. Maybe you might even have to rearrange something at work or some childcare, and I know it will cost you, as it will cost me. But we need the commitment to an endeavor like this, not for a better church, but for a more vibrant Christianity. These practices will help your church move into the future, but these practices will also help you understand what it means to die to self and to live for Christ. I hope you've already committed to the cause of praying for it, joining us in the devotional readings or participating in discussion groups or helping with goal setting, and holding your leadership accountable to following through on our commitment to Christ in these 5 practices. Christ invites us individually and corporately to follow him, not just to have a nice church, but to follow him is to be a part of a vibrant movement in the world that just so happens to bear the name church. So how about you? The road to personal success is a road often marked by self-denial. Any worthwhile self-help book will tell you that. Self-denial, however, is also essential to the salvation of the world. It's Christ allowing this in his life that made room for us to find God's mercy, grace, and love. The lure of the easy way, man, it's powerful. But more powerful still is the love of our Savior and the commitment of our God to us. There's a story of a worker in the inner city mission who has given many years to, as you can imagine, a discouraging ministry because crime hasn't gotten any better. In fact, it's gotten worse. Poverty hasn't gotten any better. In fact, it's gotten worse. Needs haven't gone down in his service, but they've gotten greater. And a friend came to him one day and said, why don't you just leave this job before you're broken by its inhuman demands? Why don't you just run away from it all? And the man replied, there are times when I'd very much like to leave it all. But there's this strange, loving man on a cross who doesn't want me to go. Jesus said, if anyone would be my disciple, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. What is that strange, loving man from the cross inviting you to do? What is that strange, loving man forbidding you to leave from or forbidding you to do? This is his call to an abundant life for yours and for mine today. I'd like you to consider answering it. I'd like you to consider how his grace might flow more freely through you as you fit his life and his goals and his agenda into yours, and indeed, let his be yours. Can he count on you?